Merry Christmas. Two seemingly innocent words that should bring happiness to everyone. But behind those words lies a history that has brought so many into disrepute about their cultural significance to Christendom. Perhaps an even greater question is to ask if there's any harm to it. For centuries, the Nativity Story has been a central figure around the Christmas tradition. A popular debate around this subject is whether or not all Christian celebrations are inherently pagan. Mostly, where does Yeshua and the story of the birth of the Messiah fit into this construct? Without playing suspense and mentioning this in our concluding remarks, it's safe to note that no one knows the exact date that Jesus was born. With that said, where does this leave the question as to why his birth has been celebrated on the 25th of December? Is Christmas Day a Christo-pagan holiday? There are claims that the tradition emanated from a combination of pagan beliefs and Christian celebrations. This may not be far-fetched, but how do we label and define a celebration? Perhaps a great start would be trying to understand the cultural influence. The Eastern and Western churches celebrated Christmas differently. Evergreens were known to symbolize different ideals to different cultures. These symbols celebrated people's homes and celebrated the very foundations of their religions. Particularly pagans and Christians used them during winter festivals for many years, then and now. They were particularly preferred because they maintained their green leaves through winter, unlike other trees which shed off their leaves. Now there are a variety of myths and religions. One of the prominent ones is Mithraism. It's deemed to be of a similar background to that of Christianity, or the other way around. In the end, what we know of Mithraism is it's based on claims and philosophies that are tied with mysticism, astrology, and pagan belief systems, which formed much of its catechism. Pagans used the branches as home decorations during winter solstice. It represented hope for the coming spring, while the Egyptians filled their homes with the green palms in honor of the god Ra. The Vikings in Scandinavia thought that evergreens were the special plants of the sun god Balder. The Romans decorated their homes with the trees for New Year celebrations. It symbolized hope for a better New Year. The Romans used the winter solstice to celebrate Saturnalia, an honor to Saturn, god of agriculture. This was prominently a 7-day period of lawlessness. Also, the 25th, called Dies Natalis Invicti, birthday to the sun god Sol Invictus. Roman Emperor Aurelian created the cult of Sol Invictus during his reign. It is suggested that the Roman Christians within that time set the last day of Saturnalia to represent a meek celebration of the birth of Christ. Christians use the tree as a symbol of eternal life with God. Eventually, evergreens became traditionally known as Christmas trees in Northern Europe. In some Christian cults, Adam and Eve were considered saints and are celebrated during Christmas Eve. Medieval Christians regarded Adam and Eve as a father and mother of all people, to contrast the birth of Jesus and the Virgin Mary. The church clergy banned public performances about the Garden of Eden, which was symbolized by a paradise tree which hung with fruit. Originally, evergreens were called paradise trees, but some people secretly collected the branches and brought them into their homes. They were fastened by wooden pyramids and hung with candles to be lit by every family member. These practices paved way to modern Christmas trees, as seen with ornaments and edibles like gingerbread, candy sticks, and golden apples. How did it end up being a modern-day practice, pioneered by Western popular culture? During those Middle Ages, The tradition of celebrating Christmas with the use of evergreen trees was accompanied by customs associated with Christmas, such as the Yule log, the holly, and the mistletoe. Christian leaders deemed them to be distracting the believers from the true evergreen, which is Christ. During the 1600s, it was common for every household to be found with an evergreen tree as part of a Christmas celebration. In the 1800s, Queen Victoria and her German husband were illustrated with Christmas presents around the Christmas tree. The Dutch and Germans further introduced them in the West during the 18th century. Popular cultural mediums of art and literature even made it more popular. The Christmas tree took a while before it became part of the American life and culture from the Queen's influential portrait. In the mid-1850s, President Franklin Pierce had the first Christmas tree in the White House. Later on, President Calvin Coolidge started the National Christmas Tree Lighting Ceremony on the White House lawn in 1923. The Christmas tree has become a tradition on its own, filled with both Christian and non-Christian origins. The more astounding fact is how the culture of consumerism has built around it to become an estimated $2 billion industry. The culture of gift sharing, legends such as St. Nicholas and fictional renditions of Santa Claus have become a modern-day association of the festive season, although the birth of Jesus still remains relevant until today. But the question remains, who influenced who? It's not just about Sol Invictus. There's plenty of other deities who were ascribed to be the gods and goddesses of the sun. There is one country and its culture which has most of them. In fact, they have all kinds of gods attributed to the sun, 3 times more than the Greek, the Romans, the Celtic, the Persian, Mesopotamia, Egyptians, and Hindu mythologies combined. Say what you want, but the Filipinos are killing it in that game. We will never run out of mythologies, but we have to conclude in understanding their relevance as part of the human story and attempts to find meaning in creations. That's history. However, God's story is a theological endeavor of God's pursuit of men to know Him. We may have taken paths that have converged at some crossroads. Therefore, even before Christmas, prominent and less prominent cultures had belief systems or an idea that emanated from its own philosophy. But in the end, every generation must question itself pertaining to the question, what is the church's role in response to ungodliness? Christ was the answer. We can dispute and debate in circles, but one thing that we know for sure is the fact that Christ was preached and known all over the world. As a means of celebration and claiming victory, the church continues to celebrate Jesus being the Christ on the 25th of December. By now, we should understand that the day and period itself has associations, influences, and affiliations beyond Christianity's control. It's never been a world that we could control, but it is a world that God is in control. It's an old-age contest of good being triumphant over evil. If anything, let's note that we celebrate Jesus and the gospel every day of our lives. Although the tradition of celebrating Him was traditionally marked on the calendar, it doesn't make it a biblically mandatory festivity. So whether you celebrate it or not, doesn't really make a difference. The celebration of Christmas is also observed in 2 different months, December and January. The split was due to a said overestimation of the solar year by 11 minutes. This was thanks to Egyptian astronomer Sosygins under the direction of Julius Caesar. Seeing that days of Christian holidays were drifting, Pope Gregory adopted what's known today as the Gregorian calendar. But the Orthodox Church rejected the Gregorian calendar and continues till today to use the Julian calendar. So by the early 1920s, there was already a 2-week difference between both calendars. Some Orthodox churches adopted a revised Julian calendar, while a few others stayed true to their original. So until today, some Orthodox churches observe Christmas in January. If there's anything I would like people to conclude, it's that Christmas is not a replica of pagan and non-Christian practices, but it is a replica of a Christian story curated to be celebrated during a time when all others celebrated their own cultural beliefs. That on its own is a feat worth noting. A Roman scholar called Tertullian wrote that Christians wore more wreaths and laurels than the pagans who hung it for the gate gods at their doors. Tertullian's works include apologetic treatises, controversial attacks on heresies, and moral writings. He used his legal skills to defend Christianity from pagan attackers, and he coined the concept of Trinity. If one wants to celebrate Christmas, if it be embracing of the Christmas carols and sharing of presents under a Christmas tree, it is solely an individual's choice, with neither repercussions nor implications of salvation. Period. God created the world, nature, and the trees. How humans build traditions around a tree is entirely subjective. We can build traditions around anything. It's also important to note that when we currently brand Christmas a pagan festivity, we give power and resurgence to the actual pagans who dominated in the time when the church took a stand against their practices. So the church's efforts to preach Christ and brand him as relevant to the world will be put to disrepute. The mission has always been, and I believe it still should be, to make Christ relevant in the midst of ungodliness at any given period in time. Now, delving into old age myths and tying them into our postmodern time does little to profit the gospel, especially when the claims are poorly researched and mishandled with lack of understanding for historical and cultural evolution. People who get answered are people who look for answers. Consequently, people who get answered are people who want the answers. If you're trying to look for solutions because you're conflicted as to whether or not you should celebrate Christmas, stop looking because you already have the solution. It always centered around Jesus and building a culture around him. Whether you do it in a Christmas fashion or YouTube platform or your own man-made tradition, preach the gospel. World cultures will forever remain prevalent and influential in the different festivities we celebrate as a global community. From the names of the Roman gods being part of our calendars to naming conventions. Greek philosophies played a big part in our academic subjects, and the Egyptian hieroglyphs influenced most of our letters of the alphabet. They all have pagan narrations and etymological influences. But does that automatically mean that we should abandon all forms of literature as ungodly? You tell me. Modern Christian theism is faced with challenges of asking itself how influential it is within its own culture and civilization's relevance. When you live in a period where society constantly evolves in pioneering subcultures and alternate lifestyles, what is the role of the church in influencing the culture? We have to bear in mind that these are events which occurred outside of the biblical timeline. If anything, this is more a cultural matter than a biblical matter. Christendom has been spending more time debating about the Christmas saga than exhausting its original intentions. Even the world is beginning to exhaust Christmas and Jesus as a non-relevance to them and their own religious affiliations. This alone is a disservice as altogether a defeated cause. Perhaps Christians have grown too complacent with the Christian faith that has left them with very little to fight for in their own period. Therefore, we can only pick fights amongst ourselves. We must learn to study with the aim of growing as opposed to studying to groom oppositions. Maybe Christians have grown complacent with the idea that Jesus is known all over. But how many people have accepted the Christian faith on the merit that they can be saved and justified by faith in Jesus Christ? How many have submitted their lives to God and abandoned their alternate lifestyles that only equate to the pagan rituals that the early church was facing and had to deal with? Maybe we should stop exerting our energies on trying to answer people about Christmas and answer people more about Jesus. This is the Jesus culture. Stay cultured, and thanks for watching. Alright, now this is bonus material. So guess what? December is typically a time that we celebrate two major events, Christmas and New Year's Day. However, it's interesting that no one makes mention of New Year's Day celebration. I don't know, maybe because it's not attributed to Jesus. But the fact of the matter is, there are some interesting findings about New Year's Day. See, New Year's resolutions used to be practiced by the ancient Babylonians who made vows to pay off a debt to earn favor from the gods. But Emperor Julius Caesar instituted the first day of the year to honor Janus, the Roman god of beginnings. People celebrated by offering sacrifices to Janus, exchanging gifts and decorating their homes with laurel branches and attending raucous parties. In the 1500s, medieval church leaders replaced January the 1st with days that have more religious significance. But that's not all. Noise making and fireworks on New Year's Eve is believed to have originated in ancient times, whereby noise and fire are thought to dispel evil spirits and bring good luck. Now, with all that said, if you're one of those anti-Christmas celebrations proponents, will you also stop making New Year's resolutions? And will you stop enjoying fireworks displays during New Year's Eve? I don't know, but you tell me. Think about it.